Pastor Badran പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് maybe I can clarify and even what Sanil said. This is the way I understand what we're trying to do. Okay, you can, Pastor, you can correct me if you. Right now, we don't have the authority to make any changes to our bylaw. Because if you want to change the bylaw of an existing corporation, you have 2/3 members supporting it. Until our legal cases are settled, you have to remain as IPC Hebron. I think we are mixing up two different things here. Once our legal system is settled, is only we can think about creating an eldership in our church. When Pastor PB comes in July, we're not starting eldership because we don't have the authority to start eldership at IPC Hebron. If we want to start eldership at IPC Hebron, I have to actually go to the Wall Street campus. They won't even listen to me. But you can, and you have to get 2/3 of them to agree to that to start eldership here. All we are doing starting in July is just like what me and Pastor Johnson has been doing for the last several months. Pastor PB is going to join with us to provide spiritual leadership to the church. That's all the changes we're talking about come July. The board that is here will continue to provide administrative responsibilities of the church. We are not going to be involved in any administrative decisions of the church because we don't have the right to do that. I resigned from IPC Hebron December 28th. Legally, I cannot make any administrative decisions here. All I can do is, as your guest, come and provide you with spiritual ministry. What Pastor PB will be doing starting in July is exactly what I've been doing for the last 2-3 months. Basically coming and helping with the spiritual ministry of the church. Once the legal system is taken care of, we come to some kind of mediation, and either a mediator or a judge or trial, whatever, or the two campuses come together and come up to a settlement on the properties, then we as a group have to decide how do we want to go forward. At that time, what we have talked about is that we will become an elder-led church, which means that if you want to take the IPC Hebron bylaw that is right now and say, let's modify it and make it an eldership, as Pastor PB mentioned, you have to start making corrections from the first sentence onwards. It basically be, you take it and you have to edit almost every single thing that is written in there because it is not an elder-led church. It's a congregational church. So there are a lot of things in it that we can adopt, but then a lot of things you have to change. It's much easier to write something new. And I've made it very clear that whenever that time comes, it's not going to be a bylaw that is just made up by 2 or 3 pastors. We are totally fine with writing it, but the approval of it is up to whoever the members of that congregation is. You will have plenty of time to review it, give input to it, bring your suggestions to it, make any kind of changes to it, and then we will discuss it, and as long as it does not affect the integrity of the eldership, we will accept it. I'll give you some examples. In some eldership, there is no term limit. But I know how term limit is so important to the people here. So, in many conversations that we've had, I told Pastor, I said, look, we have no problem with setting up a term limit. But the way you set up term limit in eldership is a little bit different. It's not that you immediately say, after 5 years, you have to go. But every so and so, every 2-3 years, you have a system in place to recognize the will of the congregation. That is not done in the general body setting where people get to shout and yell and disparage pastors and talk bad about them and back and forth. Secret ballot is usually done to know what the will of the congregation is. Unless a pastor who is elder, who is ministering in that church has, and I mentioned this during the eldership class too, has an overwhelming support in the congregation, he will not continue as an elder. In fact, in an elder-led church, some elders don't even stay there for their whatever the initial term is. Because when we realize that the congregation does not want a particular person to continue, that person can be removed even by the elders. In a proper eldership system, there's a mutual accountability. In fact, I should be the first, Pastor PB should be the first one to come and tell me, Pastor Sanil, I think your ministry is done at this church. And in the eldership, the way it's supposed to work is, I am supposed to listen to the other elders in the group and actually step out long before the congregation tells me to step out. That's how it works. So there's always tweaking within eldership that you can do to fit whatever we're trying to do. Because we talked about IPC a little bit, I'll mention that. We talked about this quite a bit. I don't think anybody here has any problem with being affiliated with IPC. Now, the only thing that I mentioned in the last meeting, and I think Pastor was attributed to the court, I'm the one who said it. I just said that maybe when it comes to in the future we decide on a name, we should think about dropping these names of IPC from our names because our kids don't even know what IPC means. And I asked the question in the meeting, I said, what is Pastor Finney's church in New York? Is it an IPC church or not? Everybody there answered me and said that's an IPC church. I said, what is the name of Pastor Finney's IPC church in New York? Cornerstone Church. They recently changed their name. Why is that? Because it is more appealing to a present day generation to go to a Cornerstone Church than to go to an IPC something church that does not even mean anything to them. That's all I said. But if you want to keep IPC the name, I'm not going to, argue over it. I'm just suggesting something for the future of what would be good for us as a congregation. I have no problem with being affiliated with IPC. I grew up in a Church of God church by an ordination with IPC Midwest. I have a relationship with all these different organizations over the years, except for, I don't think I have any relationship with Shadow or AG or anything like that, but IPC and the Church of God, I've had a relationship with many. I have no problem with any of that stuff. And it's not really an issue for any one of us. So that's, just to make that point clear about dropping the name. The dropping the name doesn't have anything to do with the affiliation of IPC. As Pastor mentioned, the only thing we can be is affiliated with IPC, but the name could be anything. You can still be affiliated with IPC Kumaran, with IPC Midwest, and be part of family conference. It doesn't change anything that we do on a week-by-week basis. Even if you have a different name, you could still function as an IPC church. It's not in the name that you function as an IPC church. So that I just want to make some clarifications on what we're talking about. So again, we're not starting eldership in July. Eldership is something that we want to establish. Everybody wants it, but it's something that we have to write as a new bylaw when the time comes after all the legal things are settled. Hope that makes sense as to what we're saying here. So, are you continuing with IPC? Yeah, as earlier somebody mentioned, we're continuing IPC upon North Campus. Yeah, you may have to say that until the legal things are settled. But after that, you cannot function as two campuses with two different bylaws. So.